How are we doing, everybody? It's Coach Alex from Maximize Potential coming at you with another Wellness Wednesday. Today I'm talking about one of the most controversial topics in the fitness industry, ice and exercise. I'm going to be talking about exactly what the experts are saying and exactly how to use it. But before we get into that, if you haven't noticed, our cold weather gear is finally here. We've got sweaters, we've got sweatpants, we've got beanies, and we've got a good assortment of hoodies. We've still got a good handful of deals going on right now, so go ahead and grab some apparel right now with the link down in the comments below. Today we're talking about ice and exercise, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. I'm sure most of y'all are familiar with the common acronym RICE. Rest, Ice, Compress, Elevate. This acronym was adopted a few decades ago, and until recently was actually found to be the gold standard of treatment of athletic injury. However, some recent studies have shown otherwise. Before we dive deep into this, we need to understand exactly what's going on immediately after an intense workout. Our body temperature is increased, our blood vessels are greatly dilated, and our muscles have an okay amount of stress and damage to them. From here, the healing process begins with inflammation. Now, this is usually where ice comes into play. Now, I want to start by talking about ice's effects on performance. Usually for the time frame of the healing process as well as full recovery takes a couple of days. That being said, as some of you may know, an in-season athlete doesn't always have a couple of days to get that recovery. This being said, an athlete can use ice in one of two ways, either before performance or after performance. Now, using ice or ice baths before performance has actually been shown to be beneficial for endurance-style athletes. As I mentioned earlier, whenever we're involved in an intense type of exercise, our body temperature increases. When body temperature is higher, we burn energy at a much higher rate. So understanding this, we can actually see that decreasing the overall body temperature before performance can help increase our endurance during performance. So that's great, but what about after performance? So after we have that really intense game, we got to get out to the next place and we're having another game tomorrow. What are we going to do? Ice baths and cold showers are going to be the most common type of cold therapy. This type of therapy has rapidly grown popularity with a lot of top-level athletes like LeBron James and Cristiano Ronaldo partaking. But what exactly is it doing? As I mentioned previously, the healing process is going to promote inflammation. With inflammation comes obviously swelling and sometimes pain in the muscles. Sitting in an ice bath is going to cause vasoconstriction. This is going to help lessen inflammation and ideally increase our overall range of motion with not as much inflammation. This in turn is also going to help us move with less pain. Now always remember, just because we don't have as much inflammation and we don't hurt doesn't mean that we're completely recovered. This is only for performance. As I mentioned, there have been some studies recently that have been showing some not so favorable results when it comes to ice and overall recovery in our gains. Ice can be useful for performance, but ice is actually going to end up slowing down the healing process and not allow for the most efficient muscle gains. We don't want to prioritize the speeding up of the recovery process, so then this way we can go and train hard. This isn't the point of overall training. We must prioritize full rest and recovery. Using ice repeatedly over a chronic period of time will incrementally lessen the amount of muscle mass that we could have over a given period of time. Like I mentioned, this gives us a false sense of recovery because we don't necessarily have that pain. As I mentioned, ice can give us a false sense of recovery by giving us an analgesic effect that may not indicate an actual full recovery. This being said, some of these studies have shown promise with a ratio of 3-to-1 with warm and cold water therapy. This process is usually done in 20 to 30 minutes. If we'd like to try this out, the easiest way that we can be doing this is going to be in a shower. So if we're following that 3-to-1 time ratio with warm to cold, ideally we're in that warm water for 6 minutes, immediately followed by 2 minutes of cold water. We're going to repeat this for 3 rounds, and ideally we're going to end on that cold water. As I mentioned, some of the evidence itself is still up in the air, but these studies have shown promise. So go ahead and give it a try on the next time that we have a really intense workout. But that's about all I got for us today. I hope we learned something new. Like I mentioned earlier, the new cold weather gear is here. We still got deals going on, so go ahead and grab some while you can. Remember, this is always a conversation, so don't forget to leave a like, comment down below with anything that you learned, any questions that you may have, or any suggestions for future content that you want to see. But other than that, I'm Coach Alex. Y'all be good. Drink some water. I'll see y'all in the next one.